Good morning, everybody. Before I begin, can I acknowledge the Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nation as the custodians of the land on which you're all meeting today, and I'm pleased to be with you by video. I'm pleased, of course, to open this conference, and it's hosted jointly by the Australian Centre for Corporate Social Responsibility, with whom we've recently been working, and PASA, the Procurement and Supply Australasia. And the aim, of course, is to discuss the very specific issue of corporate social responsibility within the business supply chain. My core message today from the Australian Human Rights Commission is that global research now pretty thoroughly demonstrates that respect for human rights is not only right and the legal thing to do, but also it's good for business. Breaches of human rights can lead to very serious costs of doing business, posing risks to reputation and brand, and risks of costly litigation. Failing to protect human rights can also damage relationships with employees, with customers, business partners, and of course with the local communities in which businesses operate. Conversely, embracing human rights brings many valuable benefits to business: original thinking, innovation, and productivity. Respecting human rights within the corporate sphere can generate new business opportunities and create value for the community more generally. At the Australian Human Rights Commission, we have a special, if not unique, understanding of the kinds of human rights breaches that can occur through business practices. One of the main functions of the Commission is the handling of human rights complaints and discrimination complaints made under various federal legislation and the treaties to which Australia is a party. The Commission deals with human rights and discrimination breaches through an informal dispute resolution process, which is relatively fast, and it costs nothing to either the complainant or the party complained about. And the key objective, of course, is to resolve, if possible, the complaint by conciliation. Last year, we received nearly 20,000 inquiries and over 2,200 formal complaints about discrimination or breaches of human rights. And here is the key point: the majority of these complaints involve businesses in their role as employers or as providers of goods and services. For example, 80% of all complaints under the Sex Discrimination Act arose in the context of employment. 62% of complaints received under the Age Discrimination Act arose in employment, and 37% arose in employment under the Race Discrimination Act. In relation to the Disability Act, 33% of all complaints arose in the context of employment, and 39% in the context of the delivery of goods and services. So I think you can see from these statistics that through the complaint processes, we see how businesses both breach human rights, but most importantly, how they are able to protect and promote those rights and to create a diverse and inclusive workplace. Indeed, the common outcome that parties seek is change to their culture. It's become clear that in order to achieve substantive human rights, systemic and voluntary changes must be made through the business community. So in this sense, businesses are both the cause and the solution to many of the human rights issues that face ordinary Australians. And it's for this reason that the Australian Human Rights Commission has made implementation of human rights within the business community a strategic priority. And as part of that priority, we have partnered with the Australian Centre for Corporate Social Responsibility and the United Nations Global Compact to examine, in particular, supply chain practices. We've now are soon to launch a report on the 2nd of December, Human Rights in the Supply Chain, and that will be launched at the La Trobe Business School. The research underpinning the report sets out to map how Australian businesses currently deal with abuses of human rights in their own supply chains. The methodology was to initially conduct some basic desktop research and then to survey Australian businesses directly, followed by interviews with appropriate respondents. The research focused on 2 supply chains in the banking and finance sector and agriculture and food supply. And the key findings are sometimes surprising. One is that Australian businesses do increasingly understand that to respect human rights, for example through policies of diversity of employment, they do understand that it's good for business, but it remains the case that human rights within their businesses are not yet a priority, and certainly not within supply chains. We also found that employees rather than customers are the key driver to respect human rights, for it's the employees who recognise the importance of human rights to brand and recognition and to productive relationships with customers, partners and local communities. We also found that the role of employees was confirmed by the respondents who said that human rights are focused on workplaces for businesses, construction sites and offices, which indicates perhaps an obvious point that businesses will protect human rights in the areas where they have some direct operational control. It also seems that fewer than half of the respondents to the survey said their companies had no written policy on human rights, an area where we think there's some room for improvement. We also identified through the research some of the key barriers, which included limited visibility into the practices of suppliers and limited staff capacity or authority, legally or persuasive authority, to address human rights impacts. Well, at the Commission then, we know that achieving systemic change requires an informed and engaged business community, and that's why we're particularly pleased to see this conference go forward, because it will foster the goals of integrating human rights protection within our organisations and particularly within the supply chain. So good luck for your discussions over the next few hours, and thank you very much for having me for this initial stage. Thank you.